All right, I think we are live as of now. And everybody, welcome. Uh, Hopefully, this will be something that I try to do every week. I've been meaning to stream more and more often, and hope everyone can hear me at the moment. I'll just check back the comments every few minutes. But yeah, just wanted to welcome you all to this late night Wednesday stream. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at what we got going on right now. So, as most of you probably know, yesterday they announced, or James Gunn announced, the DC lineup for the new DC Universe. This was a video that he posted, but this Variety article had come out just a few minutes before they posted it, pretty much exactly at 11 a.m. Central Time, as this article says. On the Pacific side of things, they posted at 9 a.m., but this was actually from a press conference that was held the Monday before. Been a lot of excitement leading up to this as the future of DC, with now James Gunn and Peter Safran running the show. There's been a lot of excitement for both of them and what exactly they'd have planned. And I think the best way to kind of go about this and my thoughts on it is to maybe discuss some of my thoughts on the movies that had come before, and starting with the DCEU, as it a few years into its existence, it eventually was called the DC Extended Universe. Started with Man of Steel, which was only really made because The Dark Knight made a lot of money. Batman Begins came out, made some money. Superman Returns came out. I think they expected it to make even more money than Batman Begins, given that it was a sequel to the more popular Superman franchise, Superman the movie, Superman 2. But it didn't make as much as Batman Begins. From what I remember, they made pretty close to the same amount. Dark Knight came out in 2008 and made even more money. And then at that point, it was decided we're going to make a new Superman movie. 2012, Dark Knight Rises comes out. That makes even more money. Same year, The Avengers comes out. And Marvel's plan to make a conjoined universe has finally come to fruition. The Avengers came out, huge success, 1.5 billion worldwide. And Warner Brothers looks at this as their upcoming Man of Steel, which was taking lots of notes from the Nolan Batman franchise. They look at it and they say, oh boy, we need our own Avengers. So get their own Avengers they did. What did they do? Well, they still released Man of Steel pretty much the way it was. They were hoping it was going to make a lot of money, but unfortunately, it's not exactly what happened. The movie still did make money. Man of Steel was still a pretty good success, but it was not nearly the success they were hoping for. Who is the person really making the money in the DC universe? Batman. We need to get Batman into this franchise. But despite the fact that Christopher Nolan was, I believe, an executive producer on Man of Steel, with a lot of notes taken from what he did with his Dark Knight trilogy, they decided, no, we're actually not going to have that Batman part of this universe. That storyline's wrapped up. Christopher Nolan, who has a lot of creative control over that franchise, does not want Christian Bale Batman as part of the DC universe. So, we have to get a new Batman. They hire Ben Affleck. It was controversial at the time. But, anyways, the movie comes out in 2016. Batman v Superman. And from my understanding, despite Zack Snyder's wishes to just simply make a Man of Steel 2, they instead turned the movie into a very fast-paced version of the Avengers. I remember the original plan was, instead of having individual films and having the characters come together in like a Justice League movie, they instead were thinking of doing a Justice League movie and then having the individual films after that. In a way, that kind of did play out, but what happened is Batman v Superman came out, and a movie with both Batman and Superman in it did not make $1 billion. Warner Brothers, I think, had that expectation. That expectation was not met. The movie did not get good reviews, despite the fact that it had a huge fan base and an extended cut came out that was better received. The movie itself, at the box office, didn't make what Warner Brothers believed it was going to make. Because of that, they interfered with Justice League, which caused Zack Snyder to walk away from it, or from rumors have said that possibly he was even fired. Joss Whedon was brought on board, made the Justice League, which was a scrambled together mess that, while I enjoyed the movie at the time for just being a dumb superhero action movie, obviously it was a chopped together mess that did not please the fans, especially those of fans of the Zack Snyder films. We still had Wonder Woman come out that same year to pretty surprisingly good reviews and numbers, I think, based on what Warner Brothers was projecting. We also had an Aquaman movie come out in 2018 that was extremely well received. We also had, and I forgot to mention Suicide Squad in 2016, but that kind of fell under the same curse that Justice League fell under. A lot of studio meddling and a lot of trying to fix it based on the reception to Batman v Superman. 2018. Then we had 2019. We had Shazam. And Shazam and Aquaman both, in a way, made more money than was expected. Shazam had really good reviews. It wasn't a huge moneymaker, but I think it still did slightly better than even Warner Brothers was thinking it would do. Enough so that they decided to greenlight a sequel. However, that might have been just because they were planning on this Black Adam movie that had been in many years into development already. That Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who is now a very well-known household name, they were excited for Black Adam to come out. So it makes sense to then make a Shazam 2, even if Black Adam is not going to be in it at all. And apparently Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wants nothing to do with Shazam. He wants something to do with Superman. During this time, it was kind of weird, too, because 2020 hit, and these movies were halted. Birds of Prey came out. No one really cared for it, it seemed, even though it did get pretty good reviews. And personally, I actually liked that movie a lot. But I know that some people didn't like the movie. We had the pandemic hit. Some of the other future movies that were originally planned way back when Batman v Superman was announced were canceled. And we also had The Flash pushed back many times. At this point, The Flash had been rumored to be a major DCEU reset. Throughout this entire time, Warner Brothers had been bought and sold by many different companies. Many different hands had changed over. And by the time we finally had The Flash prepared for release, and the pandemic hit. That movie's going to have Michael Keaton in it. The original rumor goes that Michael Keaton was going to take the role of Ben Affleck as the primary Batman. You see, Ben Affleck became so disillusioned with all the projects that he ended up completely dropping out of the Batman movie he planned to direct and star in, with a script that Warner Brothers says is fantastic, according to reports. And eventually that movie turned into Matt Reeves' outside of this universe, The Batman. And during this time, Henry Cavill also dropped out as Superman. The Flash was meant to be a reset where they would introduce a new Superman, who would actually be just Supergirl, with a newly casted actress. There would also be a Batgirl and a Batman in Batman's, the original Batman, Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton then was going to have a cameo in Aquaman, and I believe the idea was that he was going to reassemble the Justice League for a future Justice League movie, but he was going to take the role of what Ben Affleck was doing as Batman and be an aged Batman. But in a world where the Flash mixed things up, where Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck were gone, but now we had Supergirl and Michael Keaton Batman. I don't know exactly what that movie was going to look like. I've been very excited for that movie for a long time, despite all the mess that's been going on with it. I want to see that movie. But since then, the company has now been bought by Discovery. The biggest plan that Discovery had was to actually make DC its own company, rather than have the films released by Warner Brothers. Because they own DC Comics, they can release the movies themselves. It's not like they were selling the rights to those films for many years, and then, in Marvel's case, they weren't able to get the rights back to a lot of the properties. DC has always retained the rights to all of their properties, within recent years anyway. So Warner Brothers has always had the movies in-house. But finally, the bright idea came about to make DC its own company. So, what did they do? Well, they had James Gunn run everything. And now, finally, he's announced a new lineup to fix the cobbled together, sort of messy, sort of not well-received DCEU, mostly run by the vision Zack Snyder originally presented, with some asterisks here and there. Anyway, now we're here. Now this is where we are, the Variety article. I'm going to kind of be hopping back a little bit back in time here and there as I go through this, but I was excited to see what James Gunn had planned, but I have my issues. Not with James Gunn at all. I think James Gunn is a terrific, wonderful choice for running the DC brand. I know some people had some issues with him being chosen. I think there's a lot of the Snyder fan base has been, I think, thinking that James Gunn has been more negative towards Zack Snyder and his movies, when I haven't gotten that impression. In fact, James Gunn originally wrote Dawn of the Dead for Zack Snyder, which was his first major film that he wrote, and then also Zack Snyder's first major film, and a lot of people say it's the best movie he's made. So I don't really know if I believe that. I don't think there's meant to be a war between Zack Snyder and James Gunn. I think James Gunn, just as a creative, has a good sense of what the audiences want, and I think that's something that an IP like DC needs. To take some creative chances, but also to give the people what they want. Guardians, for instance, Guardians of the Galaxy, was a very out there movie. It took some creative risks. It was a very risky movie for what Marvel was doing at that time. But also, James Gunn delivered on what people want out of a great movie. He's been very good at that. So, having him run DC, I think, is a great choice. But I do have my issues with people saying that Warner Brothers is completely different from the previous regimes, because we have David Zaslav, who now runs Warner Brothers. I'll be out straightforward. I'm not a fan so far, but I guess it depends on what the future holds. As of right now, the only thing he's really done is he's been trying to find ways to save the company money, which is understandable. I mean, it was spending way more money than it should have been, and then he had this streaming service, which they were pumping more money into. And I love HBO Max, but, for the amount of content that they have on there, and for the amount of original content that I don't see a lot of people talking about, yeah, it seems like they were probably running out of money. Just want to shout out Undead Nerd. Thanks for finding this channel. I hope you're enjoying what you're listening to. I'm just kind of blabbering here. It's easy for the stockholders of Warner Brothers to look at David Zaslav and be happy with what he's doing, because he's finding ways to finally save the company money. But at the same time, I need to see what David Zaslav is greenlighting. And from my perspective, I have yet to see much of what he's greenlit. It seems like he's more gotten rid of things, but hasn't greenlit much. So I don't... The View with the Drew, hey, what's up to you as well? Thanks for watching. So I need to see what he's going to greenlight in the future and what he's going to present. I don't want to just see his money-saving techniques. I want to see what kind of projects he greenlights. Here's my case in point. Here's my biggest problem. Batgirl. And I know we've been going back to that movie over and over again, beating it like a drum. I get it. Some people are like, look, the movie was going to be bad. I take that personally because I love Michael Keaton, and any chance to see Michael Keaton as Batman again, we need to take it. And granted, I haven't seen him in The Flash yet. Maybe he's not going to be great as Batman again. Maybe he is just too old. But as someone who never got to see a Michael Keaton Batman premiere in theaters, I'm excited for The Flash. And if he's great, it's only going to suck all the more that we're never going to see this Batgirl movie. Let alone that other Batman movie that we didn't even know about, Batman Beyond, which was going to star Michael Keaton, we were told it was canceled before it was even announced. And we're like, they were going to do that? I'm looking forward to Lanterns because I've always been a Green Lantern fan since I was a child. Like, that's the thing, too, with this plan. They are finally doing a proper Green Lantern show. I say proper in the sense of, like, I trust James Gunn and company to do a better job of Green Lantern than what we've seen before. You know, besides, like, a quick cameo in Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Ryan Reynolds movie, Green Lantern's been screwed unless it's, like, animation. The View with the Drew, excellent news. My birthday was yesterday. Well, happy birthday. And I hope you had a great birthday yesterday. Made the most of it on a wonderful Tuesday birthday. Busiest day of the week, busiest day of the work week. And you had to fit a birthday in there too. You celebrating this weekend, or did you already celebrate? I think Chris Pratt should be Hal Jordan or Booster Gold. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Chris Pratt finds a way in here. That won't shock me. He'll probably find his way into the DC universe, especially since Guardians is wrapping up. But we'll have to see. I don't know much about Green Lantern, so I can't really say one way or another if Chris Pratt would be a good choice or not. But anyway, David Zaslav canceled Batgirl. And I get the real reason that he did it. It was because the movie, for what they spent on it, which was not the usual sized budget for these superhero movies, it was about half of what they usually cost. The movie on a budget scale was probably going to look like a lower budget, maybe even TV movie, possibly. And they said, well, look, it doesn't fit our vision of what we're doing right now. And some executives have gone as far as to say the movie's not good, it's unreleasable. I don't know exactly what James Gunn meant by that when he said unreleasable, because when I hear that, I'm like, well, is it unreleasable in the fact that you didn't finish it? Because it might just mean that, because it's a work print. So he's like, I can't release it because it's, it's not finished. But the reason they got rid of it was for a tax incentive. Yeah, he's trying to save the company money. And, if you look at that movie, you're like, look, I mean, they were cutting projects that had already been released on HBO Max, and I think they're just removing them indefinitely, even canceling like Blu-ray releases so those movies can be removed from history so they can get a tax incentive. I think it's something that they were only allowed to do the year they bought the company. I don't think that can be something they can keep doing. We've seen other streaming services like cancel shows that were finished, but they're shopping them over to other streamers. In the case of something like Batgirl, obviously they weren't going to, shop it over to something like Netflix because it's their own IP. They're not going to sell it to another company. But also, maybe they were just that unproud of the movie. But the reason I don't really trust David Zaslav and some of the executives at Warner Brothers' decision on that is because these are the same people that looked at the two movies they were able to release this year, Don't Worry, Darling, and Black Adam, and they said, yeah, those are good to go. And I get why they released those. It's because those movies potentially could make more money than Batgirl, and they had more money behind them than Batgirl. But when you're publicly saying, even if it's a PR thing, if you're publicly saying that one movie's so bad we can't release it, but then in the same breath you're releasing Black Adam and you're like, no, it's great, we're excited. It's hard to trust your opinion after that. I celebrated last night. Well, hope you had a good night then. The plot synopsis for Booster Gold makes sense for Chris Pratt's personal life. And I heard that, that character in general is a little more comedic. It's probably going to have a similar fate to one of the Fantastic Four movies. Okay, yeah, Batgirl, yeah, but definitely. I think Batgirl will show up at some point. Accidentally finds its way online. That is definitely in its future. Oh, I lost it for a second. Okay. Yeah, and by the way, with Black Adam, I didn't think it was a bad movie. It's just that the way they were positioning it, where, Dwayne The Rock Johnson was going around saying, this is kind of our Iron Man. He made it sound like he was going to have a huge creative input for the future of the movies. And that's all, I believe that stuff. In fact, when we had these Variety articles coming out, which were saying things like, oh, he was getting pushy with some of the producers as insiders at the studios. he was bringing tequila to the premiere of Black Adam because he owns the tequila, and it's like, this is for children, this is a PG-13 movie, why'd you bring tequila there? I'm like, really? Tequila? You're mad about tequila? A Hollywood premiere has tequila. Of all the problems that are going on in Hollywood's history, you're mad about tequila at a PG-13 premiere where I'm gonna guess the movie was not packed with 13-year-olds at that premiere. So no, that Variety article was a hit job to try to put more of the blame on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Here's the real truth. This is what happened. Black Adam was prepared to be released. They assumed it'd be a big moneymaker just because they have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in the movie. And yeah, I even thought it would make more money than it did. But it's one of those cases where it's like, I don't know, Icarus flew too close to the sun. The Rock has had many, many, many successes, and it's all been building towards Black Adam, a movie he was developing and working to be in for 15 years. And it just had, I had this gut feeling that despite the fact that I still thought it would make money, even more than what it did, I had a gut feeling now. I'm like, I feel like this one's not going to work. I feel like this is just that big moment where it's going to come crashing down. And in a sense, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson will finally have a failure. Even though it's not that big of a failure. But it's weird that Warner Brothers decided to ride so much on Black Adam by doing things like cancel Batgirl, say it was a terrible movie, publicly saying it's an awful movie, we can't release it, but then decide that Black Adam is going to be our Iron Man and we're going to have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson behind on it, to the point where they listened to him and they added Henry Cavill. And here's the part that everyone's going to forget. The decision to put Henry Cavill in Black Adam was not a decision from the previous regime, which was making all the mistakes with the DCEU, and, you know, all the regimes before that that also made tons of mistakes with the DCEU. The decision to put Cavill back in Black Adam was when David Zaslav was running Warner Brothers. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson pointed that out. He said, once the new guys came, we were able to get Cavill in there. I believe they filmed that cameo in September of 2022, a month before the movie came out. So their plan was for Henry Cavill to come back. That is the new regime. Black Adam didn't make money. They dropped Henry Cavill. James Gunn was back. I guess that's not the order. It's actually James Gunn was back and Henry Cavill was dropped. And I mean, we'll get back to that. But the point is that I can't really believe that this new regime running Warner Brothers is any different from the previous regime, just because it's that kind of quick, oh, no, we got to do this, we got to do that, and never sticking to a plan because they already had a plan in place. They wanted Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to have a lot of creative input into the DC universe, and Henry Cavill was going to be back as Superman. And maybe they didn't like that plan. Maybe they only listened to The Rock because he was the only one talking in the room, because they didn't really have a plan yet. But let's face it, if Black Adam would have made like anywhere near like $800 million to $1 billion, right now we would be talking about Henry Cavill returning as Superman in Man of Steel. I don't know if James Gunn would actually be running DC. They might not have hired him based on the direction he wants to take it, which does not include Henry Cavill. And possibly, I mean, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I don't think he would be CEO of DC Studios, but he would have a lot of creative input. Well, the movie didn't make money, so now they decided they were going to hire James Gunn, Peter Safran, and a lot of these actors started to kind of disappear as time went on, and now I realize it's because James Gunn, Peter Safran, they were going through the scripts, they were going through the plan, and they were like, we're not doing this plan. And I don't know how much of that plan had changed since the previous plan, which was to have the Flash reset the DCEU and have Michael Keaton as Batman. But since Batgirl was canceled before James Gunn got there, I believe they were already kind of backing away from that plan. So I don't know what the plan would have been if Black Adam was like successful, if they would have put Henry Cavill in the Flash, which it sounds like he filmed a cameo for that anyway, and they're undecided about if he'll be in the movie. But I guess I don't know. I guess I have no idea. But at this point, I do know that James Gunn is now in charge. He's been going through scripts. He didn't like what Patty Jenkins had. They had a lot of different PR announcements from across the board, even though you can read into a lot of them and you can feel that there's annoyance. Like Henry Cavill's announcement especially, because he's like, I was told one thing, and now I've been told that's changed. And I was like, you can tell he's mad. because that is embarrassing to be like, I'm back as Superman and then have to change your mind after 3 months. And I don't blame James Gunn for any of this. He wasn't there when they made this decision. I'm just saying that Warner Brothers, the current Warner Brothers, are making the same kind of decisions that the previous Warner Brothers made. But now they're given a second chance. James Gunn is their second chance. And as long as they let him do what he wants and lets him have the plan play out, then I won't accuse this current Warner Brothers regime of being like the previous ones. But right now, I see it all the same. Don't worry, darling. I didn't see it because of Harry Styles. I hate him. Okay. The movie's not that great, and Harry Styles himself is all not that great in the movie. But he has a couple bangers for music. I like his songs. I feel bad for Cavill, and I do too. I think he's really getting screwed here. And I don't know how much of that has to do with The Rock and their annoyance. Clearly, there's an annoyance from Warner Brothers with how The Rock was behaving around Black Adam. But frankly, I think more of that is just the fact that he tried to announce that the movie was actually profitable, and Warner Brothers was mad about that statement. So I think that's why, like, the later article came out in Variety that The Rock was being pushy, especially with like Zaslav apparently, and then Tequila at the premiere. I'm like, oh, all right, these are very, seems like tiny annoyances. It seems like from everything I've seen, The Rock seems like an amazing person. He seems like a very genuine person. Maybe a little bit created from a PR machine, but he seems great. And he doesn't seem like a person who's made for scandal. And they tried to create a scandal out of him, and even the stuff they were trying to bring up, it's like you're trying to figure out how to pin something against like Mr. Rogers. It's not working, man. That's why I don't think a lot of people even took to that Variety article. He should play Captain Britain for Marvel because that was a fan casting. Yeah, I think it'd be great if Cavill went over to Marvel. I don't know about Captain Britain, but I mean, like, I've heard that casting. And actually, Cavill makes for, I think, a great villain, too. He's in Mission Impossible Fallout. I think he should maybe take on a villain role. I think he would. I think he's really got the look to be a villain. What's wrong with alcohol at a premiere? I don't know. That's what they said, though. They said it was because it was a PG-13 movie, and apparently they were annoyed that they had tequila at a PG-13 movie. I think it's dumb, too. It's a weird complaint, but like I said, it's like you're trying to pin something against Mr. Rogers and go against what his actual character is, but it's tough to figure out anything to actually be mad about. But we have to be mad about something, because how dare he say this movie made money when it didn't? Anyway, going back to James Gunn announcing everything. Here it is. This was the announcement. But right before the announcement happened, I had been talking with friends about what this announcement's going to look like and what exactly the future of DC is going to look like. And I was thinking, are they going to do a hard reboot? From everything that James Gunn has been saying publicly and from what other actors have been saying publicly, it doesn't seem like the actors are leaving. You know, like Jason Momoa, it didn't seem like he was leaving the universe. There had been rumors that some executives at Warner Brothers were finding a way to maybe keep Ezra Miller around for The Flash, which is like, what? Really? This is your chance to reboot, and you're maybe thinking of keeping him? Why? Gal Gadot was questionable for Wonder Woman just because the third movie was canceled, but realistically, if you look at that, it was Patty Jenkins who either walked away from the project or the project, they didn't accept her script, and then it was canceled. Whatever the order of events were, nothing about that has to do with Gal Gadot not being Wonder Woman anymore. Just because Patty Jenkins isn't doing a Wonder Woman movie doesn't mean Gal Gadot's not Wonder Woman anymore. It's not the same thing. But anyway, we were wondering if it was going to be a hard reboot or a soft reboot. And I don't know. I was thinking more than likely they were going to be a little ambiguous about it, because you have these other movies coming out this year. And I think some people are thinking because, you know, like what James Gunn said is that the door is open for actors like Zachary Levi, Ezra Miller, Jason Momoa, and Gal Gadot to come back. But I think the reason he's saying that, though, is because those movies are coming out this year, and people are theorizing he's only doing it as a PR move because they don't want to make those movies seem pointless and then people don't see them. But what I think they're actually doing is, let's take The Flash, for instance. I think a lot of people are expecting that it won't be that big of a hit, just because of all the controversy surrounding Ezra, the fact that it's part of a DCEU that's not really going to exist anymore, from what it seems like. Personally, I mean, I don't know. It's weird because you would think Warner Brothers would just kind of want to dump it, get rid of it, and be done, but they also need to do some promotion around it. So I get that they're kind of in a weird situation. But, like, what if that movie makes, like, $1 billion? You really think they're not going to try to make a sequel or capitalize on that? You really don't think the Warner Brothers regime is going to see that and be like, maybe we have to stick with what we were doing here because this movie made $1 billion? And, hey, this James Gunn guy, while we love him, he made a Suicide Squad movie that actually didn't make all that much money. And I love that Suicide Squad movie, but I'm just looking at the facts. And I know when the pandemic was happening, I know I had a dual release with HBO Max, but let's face it, it didn't make that much money. So, like, I'm just saying, and that, I mean, and The Flash might not make any money, and then they can just dump it off and then be like, yeah, Ezra's not coming back. But, you know, Aquaman 2, well, if that movie makes $1 billion, the first one did, they're going to make an Aquaman 3, and they kind of made it seem like that at the press event. There was one of the reporters said that Peter Safran mentioned that Aquaman 3, you know, we always envisioned it as being a trilogy. It's like, okay, well, that'll come out later, but that's after you do your reboot. So I was thinking it would be a soft reboot. My friend was thinking they need to do a hard reboot. In a sense, I agree. Like, the only reason I wouldn't want them to do a hard reboot is that while I have mixed opinions about the DCEU movies in general, I enjoy them more on rewatches, and even then, I really like the actors. And I feel like I didn't get enough of the actors. You think of something like Marvel Cinematic Universe, I got like Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. in like a movie a year once like Phase 3 kicked in. But with the DCEU, I feel like I was always being screwed over. I want to see more of Ben Affleck as Batman. I want to see more of Henry Cavill as Superman. But I don't ever get enough of it because, you know, they're in like 2 movies and then they decide we have to hold off on everything right now and figure out what we're doing, and none of the movies come out. So I don't know. I was like, maybe they'll do a hard reboot, and a hard reboot would make more sense. But I don't know if they're going to do that because they have these other movies coming out. So I think they're going to be ambiguous. And there's going to be a long enough period of time before the first of the James Gunn greenlit movies that they'll be able to decide at that point if it's a hard reboot or not. But I don't know. They've already been doing things that are kind of surprising. Whereas I'm like, wait, so you're very much doing a continuation of the DCEU, but you're going to change some things around, or it's going to be an immediate multiverse where some movies are included in this main universe, but some aren't. I mean, he announced the Batman Part 2, which is not part of the DCEU, but, you know, they've already announced that they're going to make like a timeline of everything for the multiverse. So it's like, okay, so everything's included and we're going to set this up as a multiverse immediately, but we're also still going to include some of the characters from the DCEU. And I don't know, when I'm seeing some of these movies announced and the fact that they're being a little iffy on the other actors who play like Aquaman and Wonder Woman, to me, it spells that they're doing a soft reboot, but they're waiting to see how those movies do. And if those movies do well this year, then they're going to continue with them, and they're going to bring those actors back. But if they do bad, they'll just kind of put them to the side. That's why I do wonder, like, you know, The Flash. There are a lot of studio executives that have been saying the movie's good, but it's kind of hard to trust them after they said the same thing about Black Adam. But James Gunn himself, which, you know, he wasn't around for any of The Flash. He's around for very late post-production work, and that's it. And he called it the greatest superhero movie of all time. I mean, he didn't have to say that, but he did. And I don't think he said it as like a PR stunt. Look, if I wanted people to go see a movie that I wasn't too sure was great, I wouldn't make a claim like that. So unless he was just talking out of his ass, but I don't think he would, especially for a movie that in a way is going to be inconsequential to what he's doing, and not a movie that I believe the Warner Brothers executives, they wouldn't judge James Gunn's ability as a producer based on The Flash because he wasn't around for that movie. There needs to be an understanding that these 2023 movies have nothing to do with James Gunn or Peter Safran's work. Of course, if they do well, I mean, and for instance, James Gunn doesn't want to move forward with those characters, but all of those movies, for instance, like let's say Shazam 2, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman. Maybe the real plan is that James Gunn doesn't want the actors to come back, but it's a PR stunt because those movies are coming out and we want them to make money still. So the door is open for them. But what if they all came out, all made $1 billion, but James Gunn sticks to what he was actually thinking, sticks to his real guns, James Gunn's guns, where he actually didn't want the actors to come back. You think Warner Brothers is going to allow that? I'm just thinking of all the possibilities where like Warner Brothers is going to screw this up, even though they have James Gunn in there, who I think is really good at what he does. I'm just thinking of all the ways that Warner Brothers will screw it up. Anyway, the fact is that Flash movie, if they're saying it's the greatest superhero movie of all time, I love that director. I really could see it being a great movie with Michael Keaton back, with that time travel element, and possibly, I mean, it'd be one of the greatest things to pull off in blockbuster history. But maybe that movie has actually been retroactively changed, where the movie, rather than resetting the DC EU from a couple of years ago to fix it properly, maybe they're retroactively changing it to now be the start of the DCU, and they can get rid of things they don't need but bring things they want whenever they want them. I mean, that's what the multiverse can do anyway. I mean, when Black Adam, The Rock stated that there's no plans for the future right now, but they might have talks later. They said something to that degree. I kind of believed it because it's like, yeah, I guess they could just take things from different universes. So even if they reset things and they're no longer in the universe that this Black Adam movie came from, technically they could do a multiverse movie in the future. And trust me, I mean, like James Gunn, he's not thinking 2 years into the future like what he did with his announcements the other day. They're already planning 10 years. They are thinking of something on the level of like what Marvel has with Secret Wars, bringing back all these old actors, having them all meet up in a giant multiverse movie fest, maybe even with the TV actors. I'm sure they're thinking of that already. But let's move on to what the actual announcements were. That was how long have we already been going on? Anyway, let's go on. I've been going on for like a half hour. So here's the article, which I'm not going to read a whole lot of this stuff. I'm just going to get to the titles themselves, but this kind of goes over what they talked about at the press conference that happened the day before, talking about some of the other elsewhere movies like Batman Part 2, Joker, the sequel to the 2019 Joker film, which is slightly a musical from what I think that's still confirmed that it is going to be slightly a musical. And also mentioning that the door is open for different actors. It is interesting, though, he said that Henry Cavill will not continue as Superman. That kind of adds weight to some of the people who have said the idea of him leaving the door open for Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, Ezra Miller, and Zachary Levi is just a PR stunt, and that he's actually has no plans to bring him back, but they only said that because those movies are coming out, because Henry Cavill does not have a Superman movie coming out, and they're like, yeah, because he's definitively done. So it's almost like they would say that about the other actors, except for the fact that, you know, they have movies coming out and they want to make money still and not make it seem to the fans that they won't matter. But I don't know if I buy that. I don't buy that. I think what it is that I think they are actually thinking, let's see how those movies play out. Let's see what the box office is like. But specifically, they don't want Henry Cavill back. And I don't know if that's something to do with whatever happened on Black Adam, with the so-called pushiness of The Rock. Or maybe they just don't like Henry Cavill. I don't know. But it doesn't look good for fans of Henry Cavill. It really does look like James Gunn just doesn't like him. Yeah, that's another thing. So if James Gunn is writing, does that mean Safran does the business work? That's another thing I have some questions about. I do kind of wonder about that. I do kind of wonder if James Gunn is producing these and also writing some of the projects, what kind of CEO, co-CEO is he really? I mean, I think he can do a great job, but it's like, I don't know. Creators are not always producers, I guess, but he's already produced some stuff. But it's like, they did this before where they had Zack Snyder try to run the whole thing, but he's a creative and it didn't turn out the way they wanted to, because it's like he's more of a creative than he is a producer, in a sense where it's like, obviously I don't think he was able to fully get the vision that he wanted versus a Warner Brothers and what they wanted. And a producer, the best thing they can do is find like the best middle ground when it comes to these IP movies that are very controlled by the studio, but they still want to have some kind of creative element to them. I think Kevin Feige has very successfully done that at Marvel Studios, but it's a tough game to play. It's a tough balance to find. But here's the first movie, Superman Legacy, which has a date, which I'm like, yes, dates. I like it. If you're going to announce a movie, give me a date. And preferably a writer and a director, which a lot of these don't have. But this one actually has a writer and a date, and more than likely a director. July 11th, 2025, Superman Legacy. It focuses on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. He is the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. He is kindness in a world that thinks kindness is as old-fashioned. That's very much Superman. And that is very much a cool plot, a synopsis, kindness in a world that thinks kindness is as old-fashioned. Yeah, he's a character that doesn't really work in the modern world anymore, and a lot of people already acknowledge that. And if the movie plays into that, I think that'd be a cool thing to play into. But they said that he's writing it. Safran said he hopes Gunn can be persuaded perhaps to direct as well, which he made a uncharacteristically poker-faced in response. So it's like, I don't know. I think James Gunn's directing it. And I think Warner Brothers would want it that way, just because I think that's a kind of a reason why they have two of them running the company, is because they did want James Gunn's writing and direction on board for some of these movies, especially something like this, to set it all up. It's a younger Superman. It's not going to have anything to do with Henry Cavill, and I don't know exactly yet, based on what The Flash does or what they decide to do in 2025, if this is a whole new universe or if this is a sort of mixed up universe of some of the stuff we got in the DCEU and some new stuff. But in any case, one of the interesting things here I read was that they actually still are mentioning that J.J. Abrams movie, where I believe they were going to do the Black Superman for that one. And I thought at one point someone had said Michael B. Jordan should be cast. That might have been just a fan casting, but that J.J. Abrams movie I heard about a couple years ago. I'm surprised it's still being mentioned. I don't know if James Gunn directly mentioned that movie at this press conference or not. My theory with Authority is that it's going to be DC's version of the Eternals, but I'm worried it could suffer from the too many characters effect. Let's get into the Authority in a bit. But that is true. That happens a lot with movies where they're just introducing way too many characters at once, which is like, I don't think that ever turns out well for a lot of... It's very tough for a movie to pull that off. But anyway, going back to the Superman movie, I'm like, the thing I have an issue with on this is that, well, I don't know. There's a wonder of like how much you need to actually please the fans. And there's a huge fan base behind Zack Snyder, the DCEU, and his movies in particular, which this new regime at Warner Brothers has been downplaying, because they've said, like, for instance, the campaign to get the Zack Snyder Justice League on HBO Max was completely driven by bots. But it's like, okay, but Sure, that's true, but I mean, wasn't the viewership like one of the highest premieres for HBO Max ever? Didn't they say that at the time? And even then, when the Blu-ray was released, it was like the number one selling Blu-ray of that week. I know not many people buy Blu-rays, but it's like usually the highest selling Blu-ray is like movies that are like brand new. You know, like when Top Gun Maverick came out on Blu-ray, it was probably the highest selling Blu-ray that week. Well, Zack Snyder's Justice League is an extended cut that's available on HBO Max streaming, and people still bought the Blu-ray. Were those bots also? It's like, no, I don't buy that. I'm not saying that they're a big enough chunk of the fan base that, you know, that they're the only part of the fan base and they're the reason that, like, if they all chose not to see a movie, it would bomb, but I don't know. Like, I feel like Justice League, the 2017 version, didn't make a whole lot of money, and that's because people who are fans of Snyder saw what happened and they directly responded with not paying to see that movie, or at least not see it multiple times like people do with an Avengers movie. I don't think you should have to answer to a fan base at all, but this is, to me, this is like poking them in a way. Superman Legacy is going to be directed and written by James Gunn. It is not going to have Henry Cavill, because he has mentioned that specifically Henry Cavill is done as Superman, even though they just tried to build him up. And I know that wasn't James Gunn's decision, but they did build him up in Black Adam and immediately retracted that idea, teasing the fan base about the one thing a lot of people liked about Black Adam, and immediately taking it away. And definitively saying, like, yeah, Cavill's done and I'm doing a younger Superman and this is it. And I'm also the co-CEO of the company, but I'm going to be also the first writer and the first director of the first of these movies. I think it's a bad look in a way, but it's exactly what I think Warner Brothers wanted. They wanted James Gunn there so he would write and direct some of the movies, but to not have Henry Cavill in it and then to, like, specifically kick him out of whatever you're doing with your future, but keep the door open, maybe in a PR sense, maybe in a let's wait on the box office receipts sense, but leave the door open for everyone else, but not Henry Cavill. I mean, people are reading that and people are not happy. And I don't know, I'm like, everything about this just seems like it's going to tick people off. But on top of that, there's other issues. Superman is not a character that makes money at the box office. Superman Returns, I think it cracked $350 million, I believe. Didn't make as much as I think as Batman Begins, or at least it made similar amounts. But it was like Superman Returns was cost way more money. It was directed by Bryan Singer, who at the time was a praised director for doing X-Men and X2 movies at the time that were thought to be impossible, you know, like good Marvel movies with a large cast with a lot of special effects. And Superman Returns comes out and it can't even crack 400 million, you know. I think it just barely broke 350. And it's Superman, man. It's a sequel to Superman the movie that like started superhero movies, that said like, oh, we can do these. And then you had Man of Steel come out many years later, built on the backbone of what Dark Knight did and the Batman Begins did. And the movie still can't crack like 700 million worldwide. And I mean, yeah, it made enough money, but it didn't make enough money to please Warner Brothers. I just wonder, what are the expectations for Superman Legacy? What is Warner Brothers hoping Superman Legacy will make? I think James Gunn can make the best Superman movie of all time. I'm very excited for it. I literally think he'll make the best one of all time. But are the fans going to want it? Is that section of the fans going to want it? And will enough general audiences come to this movie to satisfy what Warner Brothers wants? Because Warner Brothers seems like the type of company that if the first movie of your planned slate doesn't make the money that they want, they will make you make some changes. And like again I said, I love James Gunn, but I am thinking of every possible way that Warner Brothers will screw this up for him. Let's move on to The Authority, which is a group that I know really nothing about, but it's a project that I know a lot of people are really into already, because it has quite the following. And it was something that James Gunn has been wanting to do for many, many years. Off topic, but when Big Trouble in Little China came out, and bombed, John Carpenter's career was in danger, despite the movie being really good. Yeah, that's what happens. Like, a lot of things are based on box office, and it's bullshit. And I hate talking about it in the sense of oh, it matters. Like, the box office declares if a movie's good or not. It doesn't at all. But it does play into what the director does in the future, and if they have a future. That's true. John Carpenter his career could have just been done there, and we would have never seen They Live. So, I mean, it's bullshit, but it's what happens. As a comic, The Authority was created by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch as an ends justify the means superhero team, an approach that appealed to Gunn and Safran's desire to diversify the storytelling within the DCU. He said it's being written now, but he didn't say who the writer was. So, I mean, that is being written, but again, this is one that doesn't have a release date. Didn't say who the writer or a director is. I also wonder, like, if James Gunn really wanted to make any announcements in January. Honestly, they maybe should have just waited till 2024. I know that's a long time to wait, but I would have just promoted the current movies coming out this year, and then in 2024 announce what we're going to do from the DCEU onward. Because it's not like they really said much more about the 2023 movies coming out. And those movies are kind of they're not important to what they're doing with these movies. And it doesn't look like anything's coming out in 2024. So that would have been the time to do this. But I don't know, like when he said, oh, I'm making an announcement in January, was he talking out of his ass? Because he waited until like the 31st to do this. And frankly, there's not a whole lot of information other than we're developing these movies. We're developing. I'd say wait until March. I mean, yeah, I would have waited more time because it seems like he's only been CEO for a couple of weeks. They got a lot done, and I know they've been reading projects and canceling certain projects and probably bringing back older projects or some really good treatments, but it's like, I don't like being told about movies that are only in development because, and it's exciting as a headline, but when you're like, presenting everything as your slate, but you only have movies that are in development, it's weird. It's like if Kevin Feige did that and didn't have release dates for like anything. The only time he's ever really done that is when he announced that the X-Men and Fantastic Four are coming after they announced the Phase 4 slate a couple years ago. I don't like being told a movie's only in development because it's like, oh, well, where are the chances this will actually happen then? The Brave and the Bold. So we're going to be doing the DCU's version of Batman. So this is going to be different from Robert Pattinson, which, by the way, that movie, I don't know if that's in this article, but Robert Pattinson's Batman 2 was announced for October of 2025. But of course, that's not in the DCU. It will play into, I'm sure, their planned multiverse, but like for the time being, that's going to be very separate from everything else, even though I'm sure Warner Brothers really just wanted to have that Batman be this universe's Batman. I'm sure they wanted it. Remember Inhumans? That was going to be a film, but never happened. But we got that terrible show, right? They've changed their mind about movies they've announced with release dates in the past. So, but also think about all of the movies that we've like heard rumors about are in development. Now imagine if like Marvel Studios did official announcements for that, but didn't have anything about a writer, director, actor, or release date. It's just weird to do to me. I just think it's weird. The Brave and the Bold. Along with introducing the DCU's version of Batman, The Brave and the Bold will introduce the Bat family, Gunn said. First among them is Robin, who is returning fully to live-action movies for the first time since 1997's ill-fated feature Batman and Robin. I mean, that's a great thing. I think James Gunn, though he's not going to be more than likely writing or directing this movie. I've heard rumors, and since they didn't say anything about Ben Affleck having the door open for him, but they also said the door is not closed on him, I think that's because he is going to come back to direct something. James Gunn had already said that he would want Ben Affleck to come back to direct something, and maybe it's just this movie. Maybe it's this one, because it is a Batman movie. This version of Robin is Damian Wayne. Gunn described him as our favorite Robin, a little son of a bitch, an assassin, and a murderer. Damian is Bruce Wayne's biological son, a fact unknown to Wayne for the first 8 to 10 years of Damian's life. It's a very strange sort of father-son story about the two of them. And I think it'd be cool to finally see Robin done. Like I said, with Gunn running things, I think we can get like a great Robin, because I think the movies have been, in a very stupid way, scared of Robin for such a long time. If this kid was still young, cast the kid who played Thor in Good Boys as Damien. Trying to remember. I do remember that movie, but I'm trying to remember which one played Thor. But anyway, like, yeah, I think The Brave and the Bold sounds great, but clearly this is going to be an older Batman in this movie, which is fine because Robert Pattinson in a different universe is going to be playing the Batman still concurrently as a younger Batman. So this universe, which sounds like it's just kind of a weird reset of the DCEU where it keeps some of the elements, but not all the elements, will possibly have Gal Gadot back as Wonder Woman. Possibly. The door's open. Unless you read some articles that say that was a PR stunt. But Aquaman is coming back, and they've already hinted at an Aquaman 3 with Jason Momoa. They also said that actors are not going to be playing two different actors, or two different characters. Like, so Jason Momoa as Lobo, I don't think is going to happen. But another thing I loved that he said is that he wants the same actors to play the characters in animation and in video games, which as a big thing that annoyed me in What If is that not all of the actors do the animated versions of themselves. So I like that DC is going to try to do that, even though I guess that does kind of lessen work. There's less work and opportunities for voice actors, but to me, I mean, I think it's kind of cool that they would try to have the same actors do the animation as well. The black-haired kid, I do remember that. Yeah. I'd have to rewatch that movie, but they need to do a Cyborg movie. Which is weird. They did announce that a long time ago, and I have no idea at this point when they're ever going to get to that. Oh, this is such a mess. But they're trying to fix it. I trust Gunn. I trust him. I don't trust Warner Brothers, but I trust James Gunn. Just leave him alone, Warner Brothers. But yeah, anyway, my point is that they're doing a version of the universe for, like, Gal Gadot is possibly back as Wonder Woman. Aquaman is more than likely back, and even Ezra Miller might be back, which is craziest to me. But like I said, movie makes enough money. I bet they'd have him come back. It's crazy. But we're gonna have a new Superman, and we're gonna have a new older Batman. And you know what this is sounding a lot like? The exact same plan they had a couple years ago. The rumor was that when that Flash movie came out, they were going to have a new Superman, and Henry Cavill was going to be done, and that Ben Affleck was going to be done in that movie, and they were going to have a new older Batman, which was going to be Michael Keaton. This is that same plan. This is just the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these screenplays are just the same screenplays that were lying around. Some people are saying this is just the Ben Affleck screenplay, and it probably is. This is probably the movie he's going to direct. So really, this actually isn't all that different. And from my standpoint, we had to sacrifice a Michael Keaton movie doing Batman Beyond. But anyway, it's just kind of funny to me because, like, I like the sound of these projects, but in a way it's like, wow, this is very much sounding like what they were thinking of doing before. Dropping Batman, Ben Affleck Batman, Batfleck, dropping Henry Cavill Superman, and adding a new Superman, which was going to be Supergirl, and adding an older Batman, Michael Keaton. And now they're just like, we're doing the same thing, but not with the same characters. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So this is another one where they don't have a release date, but it's just going to be the counterpart to Superman. But they were trying to make it sound like it was going to be a much more like, listen to this plot. She was sent to Earth and raised by... Superman was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from the time he's an infant, versus Supergirl, who was raised on a rock chip off of Krypton and watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life. You know, like, this plot and then the plot for Robin and Brave and the Bold both sound extremely edgy, and it's like... I'm wondering, like, oh, they're really going to stick to that idea of making, like, the DC side of things a little darker and a little more possibly R-rated. I mean, remember, James Gunn did get away with an R-rated The Suicide Squad. I don't think any of these movies will be R-rated, but I do think that they're trying to go more for the darker side of things compared to Marvel's more lighthearted movies. Swamp Thing, easily the most extreme example of Gunn and Safran's conviction to diversify the DCU. Swamp Thing will investigate the dark origins of Swamp Thing. That's a great sentence. Safran said, through the prism of horror. So they're trying to make a horror movie out of Swamp Thing. I think a lot of people are interested in that. They would love to see a new adaptation of Swamp Thing. Even the TV show, which I thought was well received, but they canceled like before the show even wrapped its first season. I mean, yeah, like that was a case of, I'm pretty sure they just ran out of money and they were like, we can't spend this kind of money on a sort of C tier character. Which is unfortunate because, I mean, I heard people like that show, but I already saw that James Mangold had been mentioning that he would be interested in directing the Swamp Thing movie. I don't know if that tweet was just him posting it. Like, no, James Gunn liked the tweet, so I'm pretty sure they've already had discussions, and I would want to see that, but we'll have to see if they can make it to this point. Because, again, this doesn't have a release date. Some of the TV shows. Creature Commandos, an animated series for HBO Max. Very first project greenlit by Safran and Gunn, and they wrote every episode. The show is already in production. Cool. It sounds like some of the characters in this are going to be spin-offs of the characters from the Suicide Squad. It's going to take place a couple years before that movie, though, because Rick Flag Sr. will be in it. And, yeah, James Gunn wrote every episode. Which, I mean, I think it's going to go back to, like, a lot of people might be complaining that the only things that were announced to be, you know, like, the only announced writer of anything is going to be James Gunn. So it's like, okay, so he wrote this project, and he's writing the next project. And it's like, is he just the main writer? And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's all going to be great. But I could see, just based on the fan response to him, I'm like, I don't know if this is a great start. I don't know. I don't know if this... It depends how powerful that fan base is, but it's like, I don't know, if your projects don't do well, I mean, they might have a hand in that. But I also say just go with it, because I want to see good movies, and if that means this whole thing crashes and burns because everyone boycotts it, but we still get some good movies and shows out of it, that's fine. I just want a good movie. I want a good show. Waller. With Gunn focused on Superman Legacy for the foreseeable future, Season 2 of Peacemaker has been put on hold. Instead, Team Peacemaker will appear alongside Davis as a continuation of that show. So they are going to make a show with Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, which, by the way, that really confirms that they are not doing the full reset of the universe, which I think was obvious from the beginning, before they even did the press conference. But it's like, even if the whole, like, we might bring those characters back or those actors back, if people think it's a PR stunt, it's like, yeah, but it doesn't mean that. Because, like, to me, they're waiting to see what the box office is like for those movies, but it's not like they get to 2024, they look back and say, well, none of those movies did well, let's do a full reset, because they're doing the Waller show. So that tells you that no matter what they do, they are kind of keeping stuff from the DCEU regardless. And I don't know. I don't really have a lot of interest in this show from the outside. A title like Waller and a character like Amanda Waller kind of gives me the same excitement as Marvel's Echo. But it could be great. And I mean, Viola Davis, she doesn't fail. She's some of the highlight. She's been like the highlight of some of the lesser DCEU movies. So it's like, yeah, I would love to see something that completely focuses on this character in a sense. But like an entire TV series, I don't know. And it's like, if that's one of the big things that you're announcing for your DCU, I don't know. It doesn't attract my attention as much as, some other bigger projects that you could be announcing. Lanterns, they're making a Green Lantern show that's going to have both Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, which are like the primary Green Lanterns. And I think there had been discussion about which one they were going to use for this TV show, because originally there was a Green Lantern show that was going to happen, but they put it on hold or they canceled it. And then, but this project is separate from a Green Lantern series that was being developed. Yeah, but like, I can't remember if they were doing Jon Stewart or Hal Jordan in that one, and then when it was canceled and they announced they were working on something else Green Lantern, I think there was discussion on which Green Lantern they were going to use, but it looks like they're just using both, which I think is a great choice. Yeah, just have them both in there. Why not? Paradise Lost, this is the prequel to Wonder Woman, where they're going to focus more on the Amazonians, and I mean, fine enough. That had actually already been something that was talked about, and I'm wondering if, because they were talking about doing a Wonder Woman 3, and that was the screenplay where like Patty Jenkins either left or was taken out the project. I don't know. Whatever story is true. But I believe that was for Wonder Woman 3. But she had been working on a different movie, possibly, involving the Amazon. The Amazon, whatever it's called, the Amazonians, the women of that society. Is it Amazonians or Amazons? Why is this screwing me up right now? It shouldn't be. Amazonians. Yeah. Okay. Nope. It's Amazon. It's just Amazons. Okay. So I'm screwing it up. It's just Amazons. I'd already heard they were doing that project, though, as like a prequel. So, I don't know if this material for Paradise Lost is just the same material that they're now expanding to a TV series. Who knows? But a lot of people were thinking that this maybe, confirms that Gal Gadot is coming back. But I was like, yeah, but they're not necessarily saying that this is going to be in the same style as Wonder Woman. It might be a completely different style. It might be a completely different type of story with different actors and such. So Booster Gold, which is a character I know very little about, but I know a lot of people are excited by this, and it's more of an obscure character, but totally fits in with something that James Gunn would do, given that he has a great track record of doing obscure characters. But will we make it to this point? I don't know. I kind of said all my thoughts as we went along, but yeah, overall, to me, it's still a little unclear about what they're doing, and just reading a lot of comments online, people aren't exactly sure if this is a full reset or if like we're supposed to start at a specific movie. There were weird threads I was reading on Twitter where everybody's confused about, is the universe resetting? What movie do we start with? Is the Suicide Squad the start of it? Do we go off from there? Or I think The Flash, possibly, if the plan was to reset the DCEU with that movie, and they've now changed it where it just resets the DCU, then yeah, maybe that movie will make it all make sense, possibly. But overall, I mean, my thoughts are, I love James Gunn. I think this is a great group of ideas for shows that are a little more obscure, but also more popular, well-known characters that we want to see on the big screen, but also some obscure stuff. And kind of taking a different path from what the DCEU was doing. But my annoyances are that there's not a lot of release dates or writers or directors. And I know I don't really expect that, but also I don't like being told about things that are only in development, because, that to me is just a broken promise if the movie doesn't happen. And we've had a lot of that from DC and Warner Brothers. I still don't trust the Warner Brothers regime. I don't care if they're different. They've already shown that they will have an idea, go through with it, and then completely backtrack on that idea. I don't buy the theory that the door being open for these actors is just a PR stunt. I think they are just waiting for the box office receipts. I do actually think The Flash will be a great movie, but I don't know what kind of money it's going to make. And I don't know if Ezra Miller and his antics are going to play into any of that. I don't know if people are going to care enough about that. I really don't know. But I think the movie could be amazing, and I'm still excited about it. I'm mad that Michael Keaton kind of got cut out of all this, and I know a lot of people didn't really want him as an older actor to play the primary Batman, and I didn't really want him to be a primary Batman. I just wanted him to be a Batman. I'd always dreamt that if he came back, they could do like a proper Batman 3 with Tim Burton possibly even directing. But and technically that could still happen because they are allowing random spin-offs, like the Joker sequel and the Batman Part 2. I like the idea of James Gunn doing a Superman movie. I think it'd be an incredible Superman movie, but I do think it's going to tick off some fans, especially since he's specifically keeping Henry Cavill out of all of this, and I kind of don't understand that, especially if some of these actors do stick around, but I have a feeling that some of them will. I don't see this as a full reboot. I mean, the Waller show is proof that it's not, and I do see a lot of these other actors coming back. But also, I see this plan, and I'm like, this is... The way that they're possibly using the Flash as a reset is very similar to what they were doing, from the rumors anyway, that movie was going to be a reset to the DCEU, but get rid of Superman and Batman and add an older Batman, Michael Keaton, and the younger Superman, who would be Supergirl. It's like this plan's kind of the similar plan. They're getting an older Batman, and they're going to get a new Superman, but they're possibly keeping the other actors. So I don't know. I feel like I'm still very confused about the future. I don't really know if this will all pan out. I don't trust Warner Brothers to let it all pan out. I could possibly see issues if The Flash makes a lot of money and maybe James Gunn did want to divert more from the DCEU than he's letting on. And maybe Warner Brothers will fight him on that. I don't know, but I only see what Warner Brothers could do to it. But overall, it's a plan. It's a plan of action. It's they finally have someone actually running a DC Studios rather than having DC movies made by Warner Brothers production companies. They have their own production company now. I think that's a smart idea. But yeah, I don't know. Nothing about this gets me necessarily excited. I think the projects can be interesting, but I can't be excited for something that doesn't have a release date or a writer or a director, no matter if the character is something I want to see on the big screen or small screen or whatever. It's just, I feel like a lot of this is still very ambiguous, very muddy. They're not being 100% straightforward. And it's kind of like, to me, like you're planning a wedding while your ex is living with you. I don't know. That's how I feel about this. And possibly that, I don't know, maybe that ex is actually going to once again become the person you marry, because maybe they're not entirely dumping the DCEU, and it doesn't seem like they are. But it's like, to me, I think it would have been easier to just make it very clear that we're moving forward with what we did in the DCEU, but specifically point out which elements we're not keeping. Like, we are moving forward with everything in the DCEU, except we're not keeping Superman, we're not keeping Batman, but we're going to keep going with everything else. If you would have said that, I would have been happy. I would have been sad that Cavill and Affleck are done for good, but I would have been satisfied, because it's a very clear answer. If you would have said that we're resetting everything entirely, and we're starting anew, everything else that was made, it's going to end at this end point, I would have been fine. And maybe that would have sacrificed the box office of the 2023 movies, and maybe they didn't want to do that. But at least that answer would have made more sense to me. What I don't like is getting an announcement and being told, yeah, we might, some of those might come back, but also we're doing this, and we're still having this Batman, but we're also gonna make a new Batman and a new Superman, even though that older Batman's gonna be in that movie, and that even older Batman is still in that movie, who was gonna take over as an older Batman, but we're no longer gonna have him as Batman because we thought that idea was dumb. But we are still gonna have an older Batman. It's just gonna be a newer, older Batman with an older Robin. And we're going to have a new Superman, but we wanted to do a younger Superman than compared to the older Superman who was cast in 2013 and we barely got to see any material from. And even though we promised to bring him back, that wasn't me, that was a different guy. But it is still the same guy who's running Warner Brothers, but I don't know. It's just, that's how I feel about it. I just feel like it's a mess. I don't know. I can't keep going on about this. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is the first of, like, I've done streams before, but this is the first time I've done, like, an actual, like, for myself, I scheduled like I'm going to talk about something on Wednesday, and I'm hoping to continue this in the future, either in the mornings or at night, just to talk about whatever topics come up throughout the week. But this was the biggest thing. The other thing was the Oscars. I didn't write this down, the Andrea Riseborough thing, but ultimately this kind of took up all the time, and I don't really want to add the Oscars on there quick. But I will mention real fast the Andrea Riseborough situation. This is my quick thoughts. I think it's kind of dumb that out of nowhere, this random actress got into the top 5 at the Oscars when there was no attention at any other award show. To me, that's just suspicious. I don't like that Hollywood actors basically campaign for her in the sense of like they just sort of kept screaming her name out to everybody and they got her a nomination. I hear the movie's amazing though. I also like the fact that, you know what? Despite not having money for a campaign, they were still able to get her a nomination. I love that. Because I hate the idea that a lot of movies that get nominated only get nominated because they have a campaign budget. That's annoying. But it also shows how small Hollywood is. The fact that they were able to get this actress a nomination despite the fact that the movie only made $27,000, but they were showing it in their like living rooms to other actors. It shows that, wow, especially in the acting divisions, this is a small group. The fact that I could go to Hollywood and yell my name, vote for me, and I might get 5 people to vote for me is annoying. It's a very small group, and it makes it feel elite. I don't like that. But at the same time, the Oscars themselves are elite. And the fact that they found a way to get somebody nominated who they felt deserved a nomination despite getting ignored at every other award ceremony, I think is astonishing, and I don't want the rules to change. But I also have to wonder, why was that ignored for other actors? Why did Viola Davis not have the same kind of energy put around her for The Woman King? What about the actress that was in Till? What about some other actresses or actors that were in movies that, like, nobody's even talking about at this point? I think the actors who are in Nope are incredible. Keke Palmer is incredible in that movie. Why didn't they put some energy around her? I think Mia Goth in Pearl is incredible. Why didn't they put energy around her and do the same thing they're doing for Andrea Riseborough? For some reason, it was specifically Andrea Riseborough that they did it for. That doesn't bug me with Andrea Riseborough. I mean, from everything I've heard, she deserves a nomination. But it's the age-old thing. We always say every year, oh, they deserved a nomination, but they didn't get one. They didn't deserve a nomination, they didn't get one. So if anything, this shows to me that, like, it's no longer just saying that. Like, now, oh, wow, we could actually maybe campaign for someone. As long as they don't change the rules, we could actually do a small campaign behind somebody who really deserves it, like Mia Goth, or a Viola Davis, or a Keke Palmer, and we can get a campaign around her and get that person a nomination against all odds. But also, it sucks that it's kind of dependent on whoever the actors decide they're going to campaign around. And they chose Andrea Riseborough, and I heard she deserves it. The actors would know how good an actor is at acting. But it's just, that part of it's annoying because in a way it's like, wow, we found a cool, I don't want to say cheat code, it's not, because it's not against the rules. It's like, wow, there's like another way where you don't need lots of money to campaign. But it sucks that you still have to kind of go through the elite actor group in order to get to that point. A small group of actors out in Hollywood, how do I get my movie to play in their living room? That's kind of annoying. So I have mixed thoughts. But I hope they don't change the rules. I don't think they should change the rules. I don't think the Academy should just look at something like this and be like, oh, change the rules. What, you're mad that they're not spending money on a campaign? It's stupid. It's stupid that you're probably mad that they didn't spend money when other people did. It shouldn't be about money, and it should never have been about money. But even though it is still about the voters and that small, tightly knit group of voters, you got to get your name in there. And so that part of it still sucks anyway. But at least it means that some performances that really should have been recognized could possibly get recognized at the Oscars. More people will now see To Leslie than they ever would have seen because it's getting nominated for the Oscar. And or she's getting nominated for the Oscar, and I hear it's an amazing performance, and once I see it, if I think it's one of the best performances ever, that's only because of the Oscars. So it's a weird thing where I feel back and forth about it, but to me, don't change your rules, but I hope they use that same kind of playbook in the future for other actors who really deserve it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time.